Hello. Welcome to the operating system of the human race. You interact with it every time you buy a coffee, clock in at work, or panic about rent. But most of us have no idea how the machine actually works. We call this machine economics. To understand economics, we have to start with the fundamental tragedy of existence. It is the conflict between two unstoppable forces. Force number one, human desire. Your wants are infinite. You want the food, the safety, the luxury car, the leisure time, and a clean environment. Force number two, physics. The universe is finite. There's a limit to the amount of oil in the ground, arable land on the crust, and most importantly, time in your life. When you crash infinite wants against finite resources, you get the first and most important concept in economics, scarcity. Because of scarcity, we cannot have everything. Therefore, we must choose. And every choice creates a ghost. This is opportunity cost. It's not just about the money you spend, it's the value of the next best alternative you sacrificed. If you spend 4 years at a university, the cost isn't just the tuition. The cost is the 4 years of wages you didn't earn working, the experience you didn't gain, and the life you didn't live. This applies to nations too. If a government spends $1 billion on a new aircraft carrier, that's $1 billion that can't be spent on hospitals, schools, or tax cuts. We call this the guns and butter curve. You can move the dot, but you cannot be in two places at once. Economics at its core is the study of how we allocate these scarce resources to minimize regret. So, we're stuck on a rock with limited stuff. No grocery store, no Wi-Fi, no supply chain. Just sand, sunburn, and two very confused adults holding primitive food options. How do we survive? We could try to produce everything ourselves. You grow your own wheat, sew your own pants, build your own shelter, perform your own dentistry with a sharpened stick and misplaced confidence. This is called autarky. It means total self-sufficiency. No trade, no help, no specialization. Just you, your limited time, and your wildly uneven skill set. It sounds independent, it sounds noble, it is also a guaranteed recipe for poverty and early death. Because time is scarce, energy is scarce, talent is scarce. When you try to do everything, you spread yourself thin. Your wheat grows slowly, your pants fall apart, your dental work becomes folklore. Now, look closer. Person A is landing fish after fish. Ding, productive. But put that same person near a coconut tree, and suddenly, it's chaos. Slipping, falling, questionable life choices. Person B climbs like a professional. Ding! Coconuts everywhere. But hand them a fishing rod, and it becomes performance art. No dinner. This brings us to comparative advantage. Let's say person A is a brilliant fisherman, but is a terrible climber. Person B is great at climbing, but terrible at fishing. If they ignore each other and insist on doing everything themselves, they both eat poorly. They waste hours forcing skills that simply are not there. Person A spends half the day failing at coconuts, person B spends half the day failing at fish. Both are busy, neither is thriving. But if they specialize, if they focus on what they're comparatively best at, and then trade, something happens. No new tools appear, no new resources wash ashore, the island does not get bigger. The only thing that changes is organization. Before trade, the total output is sad. 2 fish, 2 coconuts, everyone's tired. After specialization and trade, total output jumps. 10 fish, 10 coconuts, the surplus literally glows. Nothing magical happened. We didn't add labor, and we didn't add land. We just allocated time more intelligently. Total output increases without using any extra resources. We just organize labor better. That is the quiet power of comparative advantage. It turns the same number of hours into more goods. It rewards focus. It punishes ego. This is why you don't make your own shoes. You could try. You could raise animals for leather, tan hides, design soles, stitch everything by hand, spend months learning a craft from scratch, or you could trade. You trade your labor, whether it's coding, nursing, driving, editing, teaching, or building, for money. That money becomes a bridge. You hand it to someone who specializes in shoes. They hand you footwear that functions. The island story scales up. 2 castaways become a village. The village becomes a city. The city becomes a country. Countries become trading partners. Comparative advantage explains why industries cluster. It explains why global trade exists. It explains why you can eat food grown thousands of miles away while wearing clothes assembled on another continent. Scale this up, and you get globalization. It's the reason a smartphone costs $1,000 instead of $100,000. We utilize the comparative advantage of entire nations. However, this efficiency comes with a cost. If the shoe factory moves to a country with a comparative advantage and cheap labor, the local shoemaker loses his job. This is the friction of structural adjustment. It is why trade is mathematically perfect but politically messy. How do we decide who gets the shoes? We use the market. The market is a massive voting machine where you vote with your wallet. It runs on two laws. First, the law of demand. As the price of a good falls, people buy more of it. Second, the law of supply. As price rises, it becomes more profitable to produce, so companies make more. Where these lines cross, we find equilibrium. This is the magic price where the amount of stuff people want exactly equals the amount of stuff available. But here's the secret. Prices are not just numbers. Prices are information. If a frost kills half of the orange crop, the supply drops. The price of oranges skyrockets. The high price sends a signal to consumers. Oranges are scarce, buy apples instead. It also sends a signal to farmers in other regions. Oranges are gold, plant more trees. The price creates order out of chaos without a central dictator telling anyone what to do. This is Adam Smith's famous invisible hand. But the invisible hand has a grip strength variance. We call this elasticity. If the price of yachts goes up, you just don't buy a yacht. That is elastic demand. But if the price of insulin or gasoline doubles, you pay for it or you die. That is inelastic demand. When demand is inelastic, the market stops being a polite negotiation and starts looking like a hostage situation. Markets also fail. They're terrible at accounting for side effects. If a factory pollutes the air to make cheap plastic, the cheap price doesn't reflect the asthma you get from breathing that air. This is a negative externality. The market incentive is to pollute because it's free. This is why we have government regulations, to force the price to reflect the true cost of production. Now, let's look at the economy as a whole. This is macroeconomics. To measure the health of this machine, we use a metric called Gross Domestic Product or GDP. It is the total dollar value of all finished goods and services produced within a country's borders in a specific time. The formula is consumer spending plus business investment plus government spending plus net exports. When this number goes up, we call it economic growth. When it goes down for 2 consecutive quarters, we call it a recession. If it crashes and stays down, that is a depression. But GDP is a flawed scoreboard. If you get into a car accident, you have to buy a new car and pay medical bills. GDP goes up. If you divorce and sell your house, GDP goes up. GDP measures activity, not happiness. It doesn't care if the activity is building a school or rebuilding a bombed city. The economy naturally breathes in and out. This is the business cycle. We have booms and busts. The goal of the government is to flatten this roller coaster so the booms aren't too manic and the busts don't leave everyone starving. To do that, they have to manipulate the lifeblood of the machine, money. What is money? It's not wealth. Wealth is land, factories, and food. Money is just a medium of exchange, a hallucination we all agree to believe in to avoid the nightmare of barter. We used to use commodity money like gold or salt. It had intrinsic value. Today we use fiat money. It has value only because the government says it does, and because you can pay your taxes with it. This allows the government to control the supply of money, but this power is dangerous. If you print more money without producing more stuff, you get inflation. Imagine an auction with 10 people and 1 painting. If you give everyone $1 million, the painting doesn't change, but the bidding price explodes. Inflation is too much money chasing too few goods. If this gets out of control, you get hyperinflation. This happened in Weimar Germany and Zimbabwe. Trust in the currency evaporates. People rush to trade their paper for anything real: bread, shoes, gold. The economy reverts to barter and society collapses. Even worse is stagflation, a nightmare scenario where inflation is high, but the economy is stagnant and unemployment is high. It's the worst of both worlds, and it breaks the traditional tools economists use to fix things. So, who controls the money tap? In the US, it's the Federal Reserve or the central bank. They're the architects of monetary policy. They have a dual mandate: keep unemployment low and keep prices stable. Their main tool is the interest rate. When the economy is crashing, the Fed lowers interest rates. This makes borrowing money cheap. Businesses take loans to build factories. You can take a loan to buy a house. This stimulates the economy. This is called the expansionary policy. But if the economy gets too hot and inflation rises, the Fed raises interest rates. Borrowing becomes expensive. You stop spending. The economy slows down, and inflation cools off. This is the contractionary policy. It's a delicate balancing act, like trying to drive a car by only looking in the rearview mirror. But the Fed isn't the only one creating money. Commercial banks do it too, through fractional reserve banking. When you deposit $1,000, the bank keeps a fraction, say 10%, and loans out the rest. The loan gets deposited in another bank, which loans it out again. Through this money multiplier, most of the money in the world isn't printed cash. It's just digital debt entries on a server. This works until everyone wants their money back at the same time. That's a bank run. Since the bank lent your money to your neighbor to buy a house, they don't actually have your cash. To prevent the world from ending, we have deposit insurance, where the government guarantees your money so you don't panic. While the central bank handles money, the government handles fiscal policy, taxing and spending. This is where politics enters the chat. The government collects taxes to pay for public goods, things the market won't provide, like armies, lighthouses, and streetlights. When the government spends more than it collects in taxes, it runs a budget deficit. To pay for this, it doesn't just print money, usually. It borrows it by selling bonds. A bond is an IOU. You give the government money, and they promise to pay you back with interest. The accumulation of all these deficits is the national debt. Is debt bad? Not necessarily. If you borrow to build infrastructure that grows the economy, it pays for itself. But if you borrow just to keep the lights on, eventually the interest payments consume your budget. If a country can't pay, it defaults, crashing the global financial system. No country is an island. We trade, but we use different currencies. This creates the foreign exchange market, or Forex. The value of a currency floats based on supply and demand. If a country exports a lot, like China or Germany, foreigners need to buy their currency to pay for the goods. This demand makes the currency stronger, but a super strong currency makes your exports more expensive, which hurts your factories. It's a self-correcting loop. Sometimes, governments try to block trade to protect local jobs. These are protectionist policies, like tariffs or quotas. While this helps the local street worker, it hurts everyone else who now has to pay more for cars and bridges. Most economists agree, free trade is generally better for growth. But the losers of free trade need to be compensated, or they tend to vote for populists who promise to build walls. Now, let's look at where the surplus money goes: the financial markets. Companies need capital to grow. They can borrow or sell pieces of themselves. When you buy a stock, your own equity, you're betting on the company's future profits. The efficient market hypothesis claims that stock prices reflect all available information, so you can't beat the market. In reality, markets are driven by fear, greed, and algorithms, making them volatile. But most of us trade labor, not stocks. In the labor market, your wage is theoretically determined by your marginal revenue product, how much value you add to the company. If you generate $500 an hour for the firm, they'll pay you up to $499. However, in recent decades, productivity has gone up, but wages have stagnated for many. This disconnect creates inequality and fuels debates about the minimum wage, unions, and the wealth gap. Let's talk behavioral economics now. Traditional economics assumes you're a rational actor, a calculating robot who maximizes utility. We call this guy Homo economicus. The problem? He doesn't exist. Real humans are irrational. We fall for the sunk cost fallacy, staying in a bad movie because we paid for the ticket. We fear loss more than we value gain, loss aversion. We're easily manipulated by marketing nudges. This is behavioral economics, a study of how our stupid monkey brains actually make decisions. Finally, how do we organize all of this? Capitalism relies on private ownership and markets. You own stuff. Companies own stuff. Everyone's trying to sell stuff. Prices are decided by supply and demand, which is just organized chaos with math. Profit is the main character. If you invent something useful, you get rich. If you invent something useless, you get a podcast. Competition pushes business to innovate, cut costs, and move fast. It can create massive growth, breakthrough technology, and entire industries out of thin air. It can also concentrate wealth, amplify inequality, and occasionally set the economy on fire for content. Socialism emphasizes social ownership and redistribution. Major resources are controlled collectively, either by the state or by the public. The goal is fairness and shared access to essentials like healthcare, education, and infrastructure. Profit is not supposed to be the main motivation. Public welfare is. Social programs, safety nets, and labor protections are central features. The system aims to reduce inequality and guarantee basic needs. It can run into bureaucracy, slow decision cycles, and resource allocation puzzles that require a lot of paperwork and very patient citizens. Communism is a command economy where the state plans everything. Production, pricing, distribution, all of it is centrally directed. Private ownership of major industries does not exist. The idea is to eliminate class divisions and create full collective control over resources. In theory, planners allocate goods based on need and long-term goals. In practice, this requires processing enormous amounts of information about preferences, supply, logistics, and timing. Historical attempts have produced shortages, rigid production targets, and warehouses full of the wrong shoes because no central authority can fully replace the signaling power of millions of individual market decisions happening all at once. The reality? Almost every successful country is a mixed economy. We use markets to generate wealth and government to build roads, educate children, and stop factories from poisoning the rivers. We're constantly arguing about the mix, but we generally agree on the ingredients. So, that's the machine. It's a messy, imperfect system designed to solve the impossible problem of scarcity. We try to maximize our choices through opportunity cost. We boost our output through comparative advantage. We distribute goods through supply and demand. We measure the engine with GDP, fuel it with money, and try to steer it with policy. It's an uphill battle against the laws of physics and our own bad decisions. But considering we started in caves trading sharp sticks for berries, we haven't done too bad. Economics isn't just about money. It's the science of how we survive together on a finite planet.